Everybody saw me walk out, but nobody knew why yet. My name's Kyle. I'm 37 years old. I live just outside Denver, Colorado. I used to think my 10-year anniversary would be the kind of milestone you toast to with pride. I thought I'd be celebrating a decade of something solid. Instead, I ended it that night without saying a word. We'd rented out a small banquet hall near the foothills. Krista's parents helped with the deposit. Her whole side of the family showed up like it was a royal wedding. The room was decked out in ivory and gold accents, soft jazz playing over the speakers, candles flickering on every table. It looked perfect. Felt fake. I sat across from Krista and her younger sister, Lindsay. They were a few glasses in, giggling louder than they probably realized. Krista wore the red dress she knew I loved, hair curled, makeup done like she was trying to recreate a version of herself from a better time. I wasn't eating much. Couldn't. The food sat untouched on my plate while I swirled my drink, barely listening to the buzz of conversation around us. Then Lindsay leaned in, a little too loud, and said something I'll never forget. "He was faking half of it just to guilt you, you know." I froze. Krista burst out laughing, one of those genuine belly laughs that makes people turn and smile even if they don't know what's funny. Then she added, "Well, he sure knew how to milk it," and winked like they were sharing some twisted inside joke. It hit me like a brick to the chest. They were talking about my dad. My father had died 4 months earlier from ALS, a slow, cruel, humiliating death. I had watched him lose control of his own body. Watched him struggle to swallow, to speak, to breathe. And here was my wife, the woman who had stood beside me at his funeral, mocking him with her sister like he was just a bad punchline. I stared at her. She didn't even notice. Still laughing. Something inside me cracked wide open. I stood up. Didn't say a word. Reached into my jacket pocket, pulled off my wedding ring, and placed it, tossed it, onto the table. Right in front of her plate. The metal clinked against the china louder than it should have been. Conversations died. Forks stopped midair. The whole damn room froze. Krista looked up at me confused. Maybe tipsy enough not to register what just happened. But it didn't matter. I turned and walked out. Silence followed me all the way to the parking lot. No shouting. No running after me. Just dead air. I didn't explain myself. Didn't need to. I knew exactly what I'd just done. I ended my marriage in front of 100 people without saying a single word. The funny thing is, no one knew the real reason. Not yet. They saw me walk out. They saw the ring. They saw the stunned look on Krista's face. But they didn't know what she said. They didn't know the kind of cruelty you have to carry in your heart to laugh at a dying man. Especially one who treated her like his own daughter. But they'd find out. Soon. Because that wasn't even the worst part. That was the same night I found out what else Krista had been hiding from me. And once I knew, there was no going back. My dad passed away 4 months before that night. ALS doesn't just take someone, it drags them out of this world slowly, painfully. I watched it happen. Every week, he lost a little more of himself. First his strength, then his speech, then everything else. By the end, he couldn't even lift a fork. Krista hadn't visited him once in the final month. Said she couldn't handle watching someone die. I let that slide at the time. Told myself maybe she was just grieving in her own way. I wanted to believe that. God knows I did. But looking back, I think that was the first moment something started gnawing at me. At the funeral, she barely cried. Not a tear. Afterward, she acted lighter. Not relieved exactly, but unburdened. That's the only way I can describe it. She even joked once, a week after he died, "Well, at least I won't be stuck taking care of him anymore." I just stared at her. She gave me this little shrug, like it was no big deal. Grief makes people weird. That's what I told myself. But she stopped asking me how I was doing. Stopped checking in. More girls' nights, more wine, less eye contact. When I tried to bring up my dad, she'd change the subject or hit me with a cold, "You don't want to live in the past, do you?" The cracks were there. I just didn't want to see them yet. One day I came home early from work. I'd forgotten some paperwork and figured I'd just grab it and head back out. When I walked in, I heard her in the kitchen on the phone. She didn't hear me right away. She was laughing. Like really laughing. Loud and unfiltered. "No, seriously," he acted like the poor guy was a saint, she said. Like, "Girl, I get it, your dad's dying, but come on, he didn't invent compassion." My stomach dropped. I couldn't hear the other side of the call, but I didn't need to. It was Lindsay. I'd bet my life on it. There was a pause. Then Krista laughed again. Please, if I had to hear one more story about how brave he was for breathing, I was gonna throw myself out the window. I stood there, frozen in the hallway. Then she saw me. Her smile vanished. She hung up so fast she fumbled the phone, knocking it off the counter. "Oh, hey. Didn't know you were home." I didn't say anything. Just looked at her. She picked up the phone, tucked it away like nothing happened, and gave me this weird, forced smile. Everything okay? I nodded. Yeah. Just forgot something. And I walked into the office like I hadn't just heard her mocking the man who raised me. That night, I barely spoke. She didn't notice. She poured herself a glass of wine and watched a show on her iPad with her headphones in. I sat across the room, pretending to scroll on my phone, but my thoughts were spinning. Was that how she really felt? Had it always been like this? I started paying attention after that. To the way she talked to people. The way she smiled too wide when she was drunk. The way her phone screen would light up with Lindsay's name at midnight. I never used to snoop. But something felt off, and I knew I wasn't imagining it anymore. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, she got a text. I caught a glimpse of the preview. Tell him I'm sorry for your loss, again, LOL. I didn't say anything. Just climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between her laughs as she typed back in the dark. What I found next wasn't just cold, it was calculated. I thought Krista was just being distant. Grieving wrong. Slipping away a little bit. I was wrong. It wasn't just about being cold. It was cruelty. Measured and hidden and shared in whispers between people who were supposed to care. And that was just the beginning. I'd never gone through her phone before. Not once in 10 years. That's not the kind of man I wanted to be. But after that call with Lindsay, the laughter, the way she fumbled when she saw me, I couldn't let it go. So one night, while Krista was passed out from too much wine, I took her phone off the nightstand and crept into the hallway. My hands were sweating. My heart pounded like I was robbing my own house. I opened the Messages app and went straight to her group chats. There it was, a thread titled Witch Coven with Krista, Lindsay, and two of Krista's co-workers, Jamie and Bree. Girls I barely knew. Girls who had smiled in my face and hugged me at the funeral. The first message I saw made my skin crawl. Lindsay, Captain Drool is still alive? Damn, thought he'd croak by now. Krista, right? If he croaks before the anniversary, that's one less thing I have to fake sympathy about. Jamie, stop, I'm screaming, you're so wrong for that, LOL. I felt something twist in my stomach. A wrong kind of cold. I scrolled. Page after page. Screenshot after screenshot. Krista, bet he fakes choking just to make Kyle come running. Bree, dead weight, literally. Krista, he could have at least waited to die until after the cruise. But knew, gotta ruin everything. They even had a nickname for him. Captain Drool. That's what they called my father. A man who taught me how to change a tire. Who read the newspaper with me every Sunday. Who coached my little league team even when he couldn't hold a clipboard anymore. Captain Drool. My hands were shaking as I took screenshots. I couldn't stop. I had to see it all. I needed to know how deep it went. It wasn't just the jokes. It was the sheer frequency. Dozens of messages scattered over months, making fun of his symptoms, his voice, his struggle to speak. Krista, ugh, Kyle made me sit through another one of his stories. My dad this, my dad that. Lindsay, you're a saint. I'd fake cry and say I was too emotional to listen, LOL. Krista, OMG, next time I'll just cry and say it's too raw. People eat that grief crap up like cake. It wasn't just disrespect. It was rehearsed. Casual. Like mocking him had become a running joke. A bonding activity. And I'd been sleeping beside this woman. I finally reached the part that crushed whatever hope was left in me. A message from Krista dated 2 weeks before the anniversary. Krista, it's gonna be hard not to laugh during the toasts. Everyone acting like I've been the rock. Girl, I barely made an effort. Lindsay, LMAO, you deserve an Oscar. Krista, nah, I deserve a vacation. After the party, I'm ghosting Kyle for a week. Let him process or whatever. He's so gullible, it's cute. I nearly threw her phone against the wall. But I didn't. I put it down gently. Went back to her bedroom and stared at her sleeping face. Peaceful. Innocent. Like someone who'd never held that kind of poison behind a smile. She'd been playing a role for months. Pretending to be supportive, compassionate, loyal. While secretly making fun of my dying father and plotting how to disappear from my life the moment the applause stopped. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at nothing. I couldn't let her fake her way through the anniversary like nothing happened. I thought about calling it off. Canceling everything. Letting her know that I knew. But then I had a different idea. Let it happen. Let the party go on. Let her wear the dress and smile for pictures and accept praise for being such a devoted wife. Let her laugh. Because I was going to flip the script. I was going to wait for the moment when the mask slipped and make sure everyone saw who she really was. No yelling. No warning. Just one move. And it would be enough to burn it all down. I made it through most of the anniversary party without flinching. No one had a clue. People kept walking up to us, smiling, clapping Krista on the shoulder. You two made it through so much, they'd say. 10 years, that's something rare these days. One guy even called Krista a pillar of grace. She nodded, smiled, squeezed my hand in front of them. She was in full performance mode. And I played my part too. Smiling, nodding, toasting. Every glass of champagne tasted like poison. The whole time I kept thinking about the messages. The way she called my dad Captain Drool. The way she planned to ghost me after the party. And somehow she had the audacity to stand in front of everyone and pretend like she was the one who carried us through grief. It was almost funny. Almost. We were seated at the front table when it happened. Krista and Lindsay were tipsy, leaning into each other, giggling about something. I was pushing food around on my plate, trying not to hear them. Then I caught it clear as day. Lindsay said, "Remember how Kyle used to freak out every time his dad coughed?" Krista snorted into her wine glass and said he thought it was the ALS acting up. Honestly, I think half of it was just for attention. Lindsay laughed, loud and shrill. Then Krista added, "Well, he sure knew how to milk it," and winked like they were back in high school, whispering about some classmate they hated. That was my line. I looked at her. Really looked. She was flushed from the wine, teeth showing in a lazy smile, eyes half-lidded like none of this mattered. So I stood up, reached into my jacket pocket, took off my wedding ring and set it on the table, right in front of her plate. The sound of it hitting the china was louder than it should have been. The people around us went quiet. Krista blinked up at me, confused. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked out. No yelling. No big speech. Just silence. The kind of silence that cuts deeper than anything else. As I crossed the floor, all conversation stopped. Heads turned. Some people actually gasped. Krista's parents stood halfway out of their chairs, stunned. Her cousin dropped his fork. I made it to the door and stepped outside into the cool air. Then I heard footsteps behind me. It was her dad. "Kyle, wait, what the hell is going on?" I looked him straight in the eye and said, "Ask your daughter what she said about my dying father." That's all I said. Then I got in my car and drove home. Krista came back to the house later that night. She was still in her party dress, heels in her hand, mascara smudged. She banged on the door for 10 minutes. I didn't open it. She started yelling through the door. "You're blowing this out of proportion." It was a joke. "Kyle, come on." I stood in the hallway, phone in hand, watching her on the Ring camera. Then she switched tactics. She got quiet. "Please," she whispered. "Don't do this. You don't want to ruin everything we've built." That's when I sent the screenshots. To everyone who had been at the party. Her parents. Her friends. Her boss. Every message. Every cruel joke. Every name they called my dad. No explanation. No caption. Just the truth. The ring on the table was just the opening act. The real show had just begun. And Krista? She was about to find out what it felt like when the whole world saw behind the curtain. I filed for divorce that Monday morning. Didn't even wait a full week. Didn't text her. Didn't warn her. Just walked into the attorney's office, laid out the situation, and said, "I want it done fast." By Tuesday, the group chat screenshots had made the rounds. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages from people who'd been at the party. Some were stunned. Some just sent one-word responses like, "Wow," or "Unreal." A few even apologized for laughing along with Krista during the toasts, not knowing what she'd really been saying behind my back. But the most surprising call came from her father. He called me personally. "Son," he said, voice low and quiet. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I don't know how we raised someone who could do that. I thought you should know we had no idea." And I believed him. For the first time ever, I truly believed him. Her mom didn't say anything to me directly, but someone forwarded me a screenshot of a message she'd sent to a family member. Just 4 words, "I'm too ashamed to speak." Lindsay, on the other hand, didn't go down as quietly. She tried to play it off at first. Told people the messages were just venting. That it was dark humor between sisters. Said I wasn't man enough to handle jokes. But that didn't last long. One of Krista's co-workers, Jamie, who'd been in the group chat, showed the messages to HR. Apparently, some of them had been sent from company devices. Lindsay got fired by the end of the week. Krista moved back in with her mom. She tried texting me a few times, said I overreacted, said it wasn't meant to be cruel. Then she switched to the classic, "Can we talk? We can fix this." I didn't answer any of them. I stayed with my friend Dave for a few weeks. Crashed on his couch, filed all the paperwork, and started moving my name off joint accounts, cutting legal ties as fast as the court would allow. She begged for mediation. I refused. Said I'd take it to court if I had to. She backed off after that. I think that's when she realized I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't just angry. I was done. But there was still one thing Krista didn't know. My dad, God bless him, had left me a letter in his will. A simple envelope tucked inside the legal documents labeled "Read after I'm gone." I hadn't opened it until that week. Honestly, I forgot about it in the chaos. But one night, while Dave was out and the house was quiet, I sat down at the kitchen table and read it. It wasn't long. Just a few lines, handwritten in his shaky script. "Kyle, I know Krista's been asking a lot about the lake house. Just wanted you to know, she only visited when she thought that property would be yours. I heard her once told Lindsay, once he's gone, that house is ours. I changed the will 3 weeks ago. She gets nothing if you divorce. You deserve peace, son. Not vultures." I read it 3 times. Couldn't believe how clearly he saw through her, even when I didn't. The next morning, I called the lawyer to confirm. It was true. The lake house, my dad's pride and joy, was left to me with a clause written in black and white. If Krista and I divorced, she got absolutely nothing. Not a dime. Not a weekend. Not a key. I smiled for the first time in days. Then I made sure she got the news. In writing. Certified mail with the legal clause highlighted in yellow. She'd been circling that house like a vulture for months, thinking it would be her vacation home. She didn't know my dad had already shut the door behind her. And me? I was just getting started. The lake house was in northern Colorado, just off a quiet stretch of water where my dad used to fish at sunrise and read the paper on the deck with his coffee. It wasn't huge or fancy, but it was his favorite place in the world. I hadn't been up there since the funeral. After I got the confirmation from the lawyer, I took a drive out. The air smelled like pine and old wood. The dock was still intact. Inside, everything was the same, like he'd just stepped out for groceries and forgot to come back. His slippers by the fireplace. His jacket on the hook. The photo of me and him holding a trout from a summer I barely remember. It hit me then he'd known. He'd known Krista was circling like a hawk. Known she wasn't here for the long haul. That letter he left me wasn't just about the house. It was his way of saying, I saw what you didn't. According to the lawyer, my dad had rewritten the will less than a month before he passed. The clause was ironclad. Krista would get no access, no rights, no inheritance tied to the lake house in the event of divorce. And I'd already filed. She was officially locked out. Of course, she didn't know that yet. She thought there was still something to fight for. That she could maybe wring a few assets out of the settlement. She started dropping hints through her lawyer about negotiating property division. She asked about joint vacation assets. That's when I had the lawyer send the letter. It was short. Just a paragraph attached to the certified documents. The clause was highlighted. Her name, Krista Lynn Holloway, was spelled out in full. The wording left no room for interpretation. If the marriage is legally dissolved, Krista Lynn Holloway shall receive no rights or claims to the lake house or any related assets. Boom. No counter. No follow-up. She tried texting me after that. Said it was unfair, that she deserved something after all we'd been through. That her time meant value. I didn't respond. A few days later, I posted a photo online of the lake house dock at sunset with one caption. Some inherit land. I inherited peace. She saw it. I know she did. She deleted her account 2 days later. But I wasn't done yet. See, I could have kept the lake house. Could have renovated it, rented it, passed it on to my own kids someday if I had one. But I didn't want that anymore. Not the place where Krista had pretended to care. Not the house she'd only visited when she thought she could cash in. So I sold it. 3 weeks later, the closing was done. I got a fair price, more than fair, honestly. The buyers were a retired couple from New Mexico. Said they dreamed of a little cabin on the water their whole lives. Good people. And with that money, I did 2 things. First, I set aside enough for a down payment on a new place, a modest condo, something that didn't come with 10 years of memories and fake smiles. Second, I made a donation. A big one. I took a chunk of that lake house money and donated it to the ALS Foundation in my dad's name. Fully anonymous at first. Then I changed my mind. I asked them to use his name publicly. His full name. Walter Dean McAllister. They sent back a thank you letter with his name printed in gold on the donor wall of their Denver office. I took a photo of it. Framed it. Put it on my new kitchen shelf. Because Krista laughed at my father's pain. But now? Now his name would help people survive the very disease she mocked. And her name? It wouldn't even be on the deed. She lost a husband. She lost a house. And she lost the last chance to pretend she'd ever earned any of it. My dad made sure of that. It's been a little over 8 months since the night I left that ring on the table and walked out of our 10-year anniversary party. Some people say time heals everything. I don't know if I buy that. But I will say this, it gets quieter. Easier to breathe. I sold the lake house like I planned and used part of the money to buy a small condo near downtown Denver. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, big windows. Enough space to work, to sleep, and to not feel like I'm swimming in old memories. I donated the rest, $45,000, to the ALS Foundation in my dad's name. They were stunned. Called me personally. Asked if they could honor him on their donor wall. So now, when you walk into their Denver office, there's a gold plaque that says, "In memory of Walter Dean McAllister, a man worth remembering." I visit it sometimes. Just to stand there for a minute. Feels like justice, in a way. Krista hasn't contacted me since the divorce was finalized. No apology. No explanation. Not that I'd listen anyway. Last I heard, she was still living with her mom. Her family doesn't bring me up anymore. Her dad stopped speaking to her for a while after I sent him the messages. I don't know if they ever made peace. But I do know one thing that made me laugh harder than anything else in this whole mess. Krista's new boyfriend? Lindsay's ex-husband. Yep. The same guy Lindsay used to call spineless behind his back is now showing up in Krista's Instagram stories, all smiles and filters. Because that's what snakes do, right? Eventually, they eat each other. A few people from the old friend circle reached out after everything blew up. Some sent apologies. Others said they had no idea. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they did and just didn't care enough to stop her. Doesn't matter now. I don't hold grudges. But I don't hand out second chances either. I've kept my circle small. Real small. Started going to therapy. Signed up for a boxing class. Cut back on drinking. I'm not trying to reinvent myself or anything. I'm just done being the guy who puts up with disrespect because it's easier than starting over. Some things you don't forgive. Mocking a dying man is one of them. I'm not bitter. Not anymore. I'm not angry either. I'm just clear. Clear about who I am. What I deserve. What I'll never tolerate again. There's peace in that. And sure, people still whisper about the party sometimes. The way I stood up in front of everyone and left without a word. How I blew up a 10-year marriage in 10 silent seconds. Some say I was dramatic. Others say I was cold. But I know what I was. I was done. And if that makes me cold? Then fine. Let me be cold. Because Krista laughed at my father's pain. She thought it was a joke. But I made sure the last laugh would always be mine.